Hello and welcome. I'm Liz Booker, and I am continuing my conversation with the author of the Aviatrix Book Club discussion book for December. The book is Death on D'Urville, and our author is Penelope Haines. Fewer than 10% of pilots and aircraft mechanics are women. These are their stories of tenacity, adventure, and courage. Stories with the power to inspire, heal, and connect. Welcome to the literary Aviatrix community, where we leverage the power of story to build and celebrate our community and inspire the next generation of aviation. Penelope, welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So, we talked a little bit about you getting your start in writing, but can we go back and tell us how and why you decided you wanted to become an author?
I was one of those children, and one of my clearest memories as a small child is every night when I went to bed, I would tell myself a story. And it was very vivid.
Were you an only child?
Yes.
Okay, me too.
There are definitely advantages. I mean, there are obvious disadvantages to being an only child, but there are advantages as well. But anyway, I would go to, in the time before I went to sleep, I would tell myself stories. And I remember this, I would have been 5 in my early days at school. And of course, I was naturally the heroine and immensely popular and wonderful. And over the years, I imagine the plots improved as whatever. And as I read, and I read very widely, again, being an only child, if I read Lord of the Rings, I automatically inserted myself in there, and my stories to myself of myself would incorporate that. I read a lot of Georgette Hare, I read a lot of Isaac Asimov, and somehow I would incorporate all that into the stories I told myself. It was sort of fan fiction type stuff, I suppose.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yeah. And over the years, I would have a bit of writing of poetry or a bit of writing of the first chapter or so. But I don't think I ever actually believed, in terms of writing a novel, that I could sit there and for 80,000, 100,000 words. It's a big time commitment, work commitment, and I'm not that disciplined a soul. But I guess it was always there. I've got short stories that I wrote 40 years ago still. So it was there. And then just the thing that probably triggered me and made it a reality was the Na-No-Wri-Mo program, which many of your readers would be familiar with. And it was that focus of just stop worrying, just put the words down on paper. You can always edit, but you can't edit a blank page. And I think that sort of philosophy finally gave me the push to start writing and complete. And once I'd done that, well, of course, again, you're hooked on words. And it's a lot of it is just self-belief that you can get there. And then once I did that, then there's something, it's a very solitary, onanistic joy, really, isn't it? Sort of shutting yourself up and just putting words on paper. It started like that.
Oh, I love that. That was, I had this story in my head that plagued me for several years, and Na-No-Wri-Mo was the thing that I finally was like, I need to get this out of my head, and it jump-started me as well. Yeah. It also demonstrated to me how poorly I wrote and how much I needed some formal training.
It's quite extraordinary. I find now everything I write, I will look at and check over. Time was you just sort of flicked off an email or a text, and, becoming a writer, all of a sudden your punctuation is there and your phrasing is there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. What's the best way I can say this?
Yes.
The most concise way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm interested. That's interesting.
it's a skill, isn't it? It's like we were talking about flying. It's one that you learn
Yeah.
and you steadily improve on. In fact, the boss, when I was flying, had a good analogy of flying is like being on a ladder. Everyone's on a rung. Some people are further up the ladder than you are. You are higher up than some others. You will climb some rungs, but no one ever gets completely to the top, because there is no such thing as perfection in these things. And I found that
Absolutely,
a useful image in many things, and writing again is one of them. Is you do it and you gradually improve. Having said that,
yeah.
in spite of the fact that I think my writing has improved considerably, my best-selling novel has always been my first one. So I figure.
That's fascinating. Wow. Well, I use the analogy of like when you first start out flying, you're struggling to manage your airspeed, your altitude, your power, all of these things, and you're overwhelmed. Like you can manage one, but you can't manage all of them at the same time. And then as you grow these skills, you start to self-correct. You don't need an instructor anymore to tell you that you're off altitude. You're able to see that and fix it yourself. And when I applied for my writing program, that's what I said is like, I, as a writer without any training or experience, can't see what I'm doing incorrectly. And I want to learn from you so that I can be in a position to self-correct and to self-edit and identify the things that I need to improve. So what resources did you use to develop your writing?
I found a couple of really good people. I did try a couple of writing courses, but essentially I've found a couple of really good people, frank people, who would look at what I had written and give me an honest opinion. Not necessarily the one I wanted, but an honest opinion of what was good and what was bad, what was working and what wasn't. And that, I think, was absolutely critical. Also, I was in the happy situation of having the staff in my office, because I run a caregiving agency, and they were very happy to be told they could read the next chapter or whatever. And they were extremely frank about saying, look, you're writing here about a 10-year-old child. 10-year-old children don't use the sorts of language you're using. Oh, yeah, true. That sort of thing that you don't necessarily see for yourself. And as you say, as you get better, you are more conscious of looking for those kinds of things. And then I find it becomes a little bit of a balancing act, in that you want to keep your writing simple, in the sense that there's no particular reason to have a very long word if a short word will do the job. But equally, I also think with writing, you should also use more than just the plainest language sometimes, because that's how people improve their vocabularies. So that's a balancing act for any writer. Just because you happen to fall in love with a long word doesn't mean you need to use it, but you shouldn't be afraid of using it.
I like that.
One of the Claire, and it's interesting what words that people know. One of the in straw turns, I used the term miasma, as a foggy smell, in fact, and talked about miasma. And the people around me did not know what it meant. They'd never encountered the word. And I thought, now that's interesting, because I didn't think it was a particularly obscure word. But, or else there are cultural things where I used the term of Pyrrhic victory. And again, people didn't know, which I would have expected, except that probably the youngest member of staff said, oh, yeah, I know what that is. And for some reason, it had popped up in some pop song that she knew. And so she knew what it meant. So
what was that phrase that you just said?
A Pyrrhic victory, a sort of victory that you have, but all your army dies.
Right. Okay.
But she'd encountered it, I think, in a song somewhere, and she knew what it was.
Yeah, that's great. So, how do you go from Na-No-Wri-Mo to your first published book?
I self-publish um,
Okay.
through.
So, tell us about the process from beginning to end. How does that look?
First of all, if you're going to self-publish, then you have to be ruthless about you have to do every step yourself, and that means that there are certain things that you cannot be cheap about. One of them is the editing process. You have to have somebody professional who will edit it for you properly,
Yeah.
because that is absolutely critical. I like to have a couple of people, as I say, these are the people that I trust, to actually, because people read books differently. Where I get a couple of comments coming back saying the same thing, absolutely, there's a problem here, I've got to adjust. Where I get people coming back with two opposing points of view, I will try and consider both and then go with what I think is correct. But you've got to have that. Someone's got to take a razor blade to it and go through it for you. So that's one of the first things you have to have. Then you have to have a cover. My early covers were outsourced to a crowdfunding group, which was quite interesting. You put it up for a tender, and you'd get up to 50 different submissions arrives in of extraordinarily varied talent, some distinctly primitive and some very flash. And of course, the advantage of that is that you can get designers from anywhere in the world. I mean, the first copies of The Lost One, I had a Bulgarian artist do the cover for that. For the first copies of the Claire Hardcastle books, he was a Spanish chap doing them. Now, because, as I say, the people in the office got progressively more interested and involved, and I've got a woman in there who, A, is a very good photographer, but B, is very good with graphic design and things, so she has done all my covers subsequently. And so when you see the covers on the books, I'm in the fortunate position of having somebody who can actually do them.
And did she do the covers for this trilogy?
Yes.
They're gorgeous. They're gorgeous. And that's one of the things that I think that, they're very distinct. They're very on brand. Like you've got a brand for the trilogy. They're beautiful. So I thought that was really well
good.
done.
Well, she'll be delighted to hear it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Is she for hire for other people, or it's just a relationship with you?
Well, I do employ her, so
so we could ask.
I inform her that with employment contracts that there's an awful lot of very small print on hers that she will, and she also, and the other thing you have to do, of course, is not just the cover, but you need to have somebody format the inside of the book for you. And because nowadays books will be issued as not so many hardbacks, there's not a lot of money in hardbacks, but paperbacks, they'll be issued in as EPUBs, PDFs even, depending on the systems that people use. So when you put a book up on Amazon, you need to format it to fit Amazon's current process, and that changes not infrequently. So just as you think that everything's hunky-dory and you put your next book up, you find actually, no, they've changed the way they're doing things. So you've got to kind of keep up with that as well. So there is a lot of time and effort that goes into the writing the book's one thing, that's a solitary thing, but everything else is very collegial because you need people at that point.
And so in speaking of your book design, so you have other people helping you with that as well?
Fortunately, the girl who does the cover also does the formatting for me. So I'm in a
wonderful,
fortunate position. And as at least two people she and another person in the office have a background in commercial print shop type thing, they will look at it and they will go, nah, no, it's not centered properly. That's not right, is it? You know, all of which tends to go way over my head because it's all a bit OCD, but it's really important. And you want to have a book that looks good, whatever medium you're reading it on. You know, we read on our phones nowadays, we read on our Kindles, we read on our tablets. So it's really important that it looks good, whatever system gets used.
Yeah, no, I agree. We actually recently encountered one of our books that maybe it fell into this. It was formatted for a previous time, and now it's out on ebook, and it just was a kind of a mess for people who were trying to read it on ebook. You know, so I guess that's a thing as an author that you have to stay on top of to make sure that it's
you really do.
It's accessible.
Yeah. You keep you need to keep copies of as a PDF. You need to keep copies as as EPUB. You just need to keep copies in the different formats that are required, and you want a page to look good, whatever you're reading it on, and so it's really important for clarity.
Yeah, no, it is absolutely, because that was really a challenge for our book club members. They were like, I didn't even understand this part. So yeah, that's really important. And so, what do you do to market your books?
With Amazon in particular, the more you pay for advertising, the more books you sell.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. Targeted advertising is, if you want to sell books on Amazon, you have to pay. And it's getting the sort of ratio right of what you advertise and how, so that you don't spend a fortune for small returns. You want to spend a fortune but get big returns, and that takes it's another skill to learn. But if you want to make money out of Amazon, that is what you have to do. And then, of course, I do other things like interviews like this. In New Zealand, the private book shops will stock my books as paperbacks, things like that. The big chains don't. They want to buy only directly from publishing houses, but the independent will sell my books. And wherever possible, I will give talks at libraries and things like that. The Claire Hardcastle books, there is we used to have in New Zealand a crime writer by the name of Na-No-Wri-Mo, who was also an actress. And in her honour, we now have the Na-No-Wri-Mo competition each year for murder mysteries and things like that. So every year you get a chance to sort of front up with your latest book and go talk about it and promote it. So anything like that you can do is, I think, as a writer, you can't afford to be bashful about. You just have to get out there and talk. Mind you, I mean, I've never known a pilot not tell you they're a pilot. So, I mean, I suppose it's so different from writing, is it? You know, you just say, yeah, I'm a writer, and go from there.
Okay, so in writing this mystery series, do you have a favorite mystery novel, or, you know, one that sort of inspired the format for these?
Not particularly. I mean, I read a lot of Agatha Christie in my teens. I read a lot of Na-No-Wri-Mo. I read a lot of current gentle murder mysteries, I suppose, is the term that I'd be thinking of. Anna Lee Huber, a whole lot.
What do you mean by gentle?
As opposed to police procedural, forensic type, which are much grittier. You know, you get a lot of the books that are coming out of Scandinavia and things like that, and they are gritty. That wasn't the path that I wanted to go down. I wanted something that was just a light, entertaining read for a summer's days sort of thing. So it for me, as much as anything else, it wasn't the science of what was going on. It was the interaction between the people. The background story was as interesting to me as the actual crime and who actually done it. Was secondary in some ways to how the characters developed. I've recently read a very good series by a chap called Richard Osman, The Thursday Murder Club, I think it is. There's a series of them, and it's set in a retirement home. Absolutely fascinating, lovely series. I read about, I think there are 4 of it, and I gulped it while my neck was in. So, yeah, it made my days much happier. But yeah, so again, the character driven, but very well written.
Well, so I am not anything close to an expert in the genre of mystery, but I hear you calling yours gentle mystery, and then I've heard the term cozy mystery. Do you understand the distinction?
When you writing as a New Zealander, almost everybody that reads my books is going to be from somewhere else, and in particular, a large American market. Now, America's quite interesting because they are culturally, you are in some ways quite different to New Zealand, and I've had a couple of amusing things. Somebody wrote. We get reviewed, of course. Somebody wrote this review and said, "Yes, well, I thought I was going to like this book, and I read it, and then there was sex. Now, it was a long way into the book, but there was sex." I can see why I think, because you see the stuff on Amazon, that she'd actually read to the end of the book, so presumably she wanted to. But, it's like, okay. So, I mean, there are clean mysteries where no sex.
Yeah, we have all of these distinctions. I know in romance, there's like I can't remember what there's a spicy romance, which means that there's going to be a little bit more graphic sex, and then there's another term for, it's just a love story, but none of that. It's it is interesting.
And then another one I got was. She said she really I think she was talking about the Hardcastle series, and she said that she really enjoyed them, but she didn't like the fact that the Lord's name was taken in vain in various situations. And I had to write back and sort of say, well, look, New Zealand is a secular country.
The U.S. is meant to be as well, but
yeah, well, that's not and in New Zealand, people do swear, probably far too much, but it is part of the way of our colloquial speaking. And no offense is intended to any particular deity, but that is just
that's just how we talk.
That's just how we talk.
Yeah.
So
hey, listen. So here's what I can't remember who told me this, but and I may have read it somewhere. But to not be, as an author, if you do delve in and read the reviews of your books, to not be super concerned about it. And I've heard authors say, "Hey, reviews are for readers. They're not for the author, because what can I do about it at this point?" But one of the point that this author was trying to make was that a 1-star review, as long as there are comments there explaining why it's a 1-star review, like, I thought I was going to like this book, but it had sex. Well, that may tell the other reader that, oh, good, there's sex, I'm buying that book. It's like the thing that you don't like might be the thing that some other reader does like. So, hey, whatever. Like,
exactly. I mean, some of them are just you just smile. Yeah, and you can't.
Exactly.
I mean, you know yourself. You cannot please everybody. So
no,
you have to please yourself. It's that basic. Whatever artistic form you're in. I assume there are people who write to type commercially for. I mean, Mills and Boon have done it in one form or other for years, but that's not
right.
That wouldn't be fun for me to do. Although that's not denigrating the skill of the writers that do that, but it's not something I could do.
Well, so what advice do you have for aspiring writers?
Read. I think more than anything else, you have to read, because subconsciously the flow of words, the flow of language. I mean, all writing is just putting down on paper the the way you talk, the way you see things. They're just symbols of what is in your subconscious, and you've just got to put the symbols down. So the more you can feed your subconscious, the more education you can get, the more depth of understanding of people. I think that's sometimes why age and experience helps enormously, because you understand a little bit more about why people do things, what even the nicest people might do that they don't really want to talk about, but that's being human. So it's get as much experience as you can, read as much as you can, and then when you write, don't quit, keep going, because somewhere around about the 40,000 word mark, everybody just goes sag, and it becomes hard, and you don't know what to put down next. And the big thing, there are people, you understand the terms plotters and planners?
Yes. We call them plotters and pantsers here.
Yes. I'm very much a pantser. And I think simply because I like, when I open a new book, I'm looking forward to finding out what happens. I write with the same way. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens as I write it. So I prefer to work not entirely knowing where this is going.
That's fascinating. Yeah.
I start.
Yeah.
With,
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I usually start with a couple of scenes that are very clear in my mind, and then join them up, in a sense. But those two will be a very clear moment that will happen, and it will join into everything else that works on after that.
Well, I'm still figuring out what I am, because I have 2 works in progress, one of which is definitely plotted, and I'm struggling with it. And I have another one that I am kind of like, I kind of have an idea of where it's going to go, but I don't have it plotted completely out. So I don't know what kind of writer I am yet. We'll see. We'll see.
I suspect that if you put the time in and you are conscientious about plotting, it probably makes the actual writing of the book simpler. And one of the simplest books that I wrote was the one I mentioned previously, the Greek myth one. I already knew what the story was because it's a very old story. So I didn't have to invent the plot. I had to
see it from a new perspective. It seems like
humanize a story. But it was quite simple. You actually knew that certain things, because you knew the overall story to start with, you knew how to balance the book, in the sense that when you're writing, you want you want peaks and troughs of excitement building, the business of, chase your character up a tree. Okay, that's one high point. Now light a fire underneath the tree in the next bit, see how they get out of that, and keep building up the tension. And that I think is quite important.
What's your writing schedule?
Getting up at 5 in the morning, because then there's no one on social media to tempt me into scrolling away and wasting my time, and no one else is going to interfere. And it's just a nice, quiet time of the day. So I can get a couple of hours in before 7 o'clock, when the world wakes up and everything else goes on.
I think that's going to be my routine. I've tried various things. My best work is the early morning work before anything else has a chance to creep into my mind. So I think that, everybody's got their own schedules and their own limitations on their time, so that they have to manage it the way they can. But I think of the competing very important priorities in my life. In order to get writing done, it has to be done in the early morning, like you. That's interesting.
It helps.
One of the things,
morning person.
Well, true, but you can make yourself a morning person by getting in bed and going to sleep early too. So it's just a discipline. And I've been all over the place with that since I retired from the military. So I think I'm back on target now. Well, one of the things that I thought was really entertaining. And we couldn't get into your website this afternoon just because there's some little glitchy thing going on with that today. But I really wanted to read, you have your sort of about me page, and in very tongue in cheek, you said something like, well, when I discovered that I could sit around and stare out the window with a glass of wine and call it work, I decided to become a writer. I love that, because my husband will walk in and I'm staring out the window and he'll be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm working.
Yep. This is very true.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, writers can get away with murder for a lot of things simply because, and you can't, you lie in bed at night trying to work out plot things.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
your brain never entirely stops. And when it does, when it jams the plot somewhere, I found the best thing to unjam is to actually stop the thing that I'm writing there and start a completely different chapter further down in the book.
That's great.
Because
That's great advice.
You know, when you reach a block, you reach a block, and it's just, what am I doing with this? I have no idea I don't even know the next sentence. So just skip a couple of chapters, because you can always go back and fill in the bits that got you from there to there. Yeah. But at least you've got forward momentum again, because otherwise, once you stop, it can become quite hard.
Yeah. Well, I know that you're working on another novel. It's a sequel. We talked about this in the first portion of our conversation, where it's a sequel to one that you've already written. What are your big author dreams? Like, how many books do you have left in you, do you think?
Oh, I don't know. As long as it's fun, I think. And I think, like everything, you don't want to take yourself too seriously. This is about having fun. It's about something I like doing.
I love it.
I like the fact that my readers like what I'm doing, so that it's a loop. That is, I don't know, feeds pheromones or something or other, and it's a pleasurable thing to do. Once it stops being pleasurable, it will stop, I imagine. But a good friend of mine died about a month ago. She was 94, and she was writing pretty much right up to the end, poet, playwright, and a novelist. So, I've still got a way to go before I'm 94.
Wonderful. That's wonderful and so inspiring. Penelope, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. I really appreciate it.
Well, I really appreciated the offer of coming on, your interview, and meeting you. It was lovely, and lovely to put, faces to people and just talk about. It's always lovely to talk about books.
Absolutely. And I look forward to meeting you in person someday. So New Zealand is on my list.
Yeah.
And I hope to visit you there.
That would be absolutely lovely. Yeah, it's a great place to visit.
Can't wait. Thanks so much for listening. I'd like to thank Michael Wilds of Massive & Crew for his help in producing this interview. Massive & Crew is empowering voices, building brands, and shaping cultures. Blue skies and happy reading. I'm ready to go again. I'm ready to say